The sponsor for Summer Wisdom program is Thornton Oaks Retirement Community in Brunswick. We're grateful to Thornton Oaks for providing that sponsorship, as we are to the library for providing this facility. When Mort and I were focusing on Jim Tierney as a speaker, presenter for Summer Wisdom, we were faced with a dilemma. Who has the luster to introduce such a high-powered and successful attorney? The answer was within our board of directors. In fact, one of our officers, our vice president, another high-powered and successful attorney, Rufus Brown. Rufus retired recently after a legal career spanning 50 years, mostly in Maine. In retirement, Rufus is an avid reader who has enjoyed Midcoast Senior College lecture courses, and he's writing short stories. When the wind is up, Rufus is out on Sheepscot Bay. So for the introduction of our speaker today, Rufus Brown. Amen.
Thank you. I will not take any more time to say that we're very blessed today and an exciting speaker. The topic is why can't we all just get along? A conversation with Harvard Law lecturer and Brunswick resident Jim Tierney. I had the honor of serving under Jim for a number of years when he was Attorney General, and in my opinion, he was the best. And what a talented person he was at that job, and he has extended his career since then in a very enviable career advising national figures on national issues. I tried coming today to think of what I was most envious about with Jim, whether it was his career where he doesn't have to have paying clients, but he has people paying him anyway, or he has access to my favorite author, Elizabeth Strout, who is here today. So with no more ado, I'm going to introduce Jim.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's important to remember this is recorded because I know a lot of you looking out at this crowd, it's a senior college, looking at the age of all of you out there, that many of you are probably typing up resumes, looking for work, and planning a future career. And so I want to make sure you don't say anything on film that, gets in the way of your next job interview. Get that up front. Rufus, of course, is very modest himself. Rufus is a brilliant lawyer. He went to the University of Maine. He was third in his class at Georgetown Law School. He clerked for the D.C. Circuit. He's a very prestigious litigator. He and his wife, Tommy, who's here, have made Maine a better place for their years of work. And your chairman, Kelly Madsen, he's on the Brunswick Planning Board. He says, I don't know who does the planning. He said, I'm just on the planning board. So for those of you who live in Brunswick, this might be a little bit of a thought. You might want to think that through when you get Kelly's replacement, get somebody who's on the planning board. Actually, I'm used to giving, I teach, I still teach, and I'm used to, when I stand in front of a classroom, to know more than my students, right? That's why I'm paid, is to know more than my students. But today, this is most definitively not true. There is no expert alive in this country as to why we're not getting along, why we have polarization, why we have this sort of unexplained sort of anger, and that past things that just used to be disagreements somehow flare up into this rage. And so there are no experts. So we're all the experts. We're all of a certain generation. Hi, Merce. How are you? Hello, Private. I'm going to do this a little bit. We were in the Army together. I was a corporal. He was a private. So that he didn't have anything else to do, so I worked for both for the next 40 years. So I'm going to do that a lot when I do have people that I know who jump up. We're going to have a discussion. If we don't have a discussion, you're all going to be out of here in about 20 minutes because I don't have a lot of material. We've already heard most of it. I think probably has everybody here seen the play Our Town? Is there anyone who hasn't? It's like the most watched play in the history, right? The play opens, if you remember, with a stage manager coming out and a little boy coming out to deliver the newspaper. And that's how he starts the day. right? The character's name is Joel Cow, and the stage manager, play written by Thornton Wilder, says, "We like to know the facts about everybody. We like to know the facts about everybody. So I've distributed for you, for those of you who have the photograph, you have the photograph. If the people who came in late don't have the photograph, I want to ask you, to begin with, what is it you see when you look at that photograph?" And this idea came from my friend Frank Connors over here. Hi, Frank, from Bodenham. He's the cemetery sexton in Bodenham. In case any of you plan to die there, he will come and visit your grave. He had to do this last week. So what do you actually physically see? And I'm specifically pointing out to the people who are not from Brunswick, and I assume that's the vast majority of people here. Just tell me, put your hand up. What do you see when you just look at that? Come on now, you're in class. This is a college. Let's put a hand up. Yes. All boys. They're all boys. So the first thing you notice is a gender identification, right? That this picture was probably taken in 1956, 1957. So automatically we saw at that point in our lives, it's our collective lives, people were settling themselves out, shaking themselves out. What else did you see? What else do you see in that picture?
All white.
What's that?
All white.
All white, absolutely. Brunswick was a white town, is a white town. I checked my high school yearbook, my friend Jane Dion is here. We counted the number of names first of all, we went through the high school yearbook, we went to see if there were any black people. The answer is none in our class. But there were a very high percentage of people with Franco names, probably 70, probably 25% of the class had French last names, as some of you do as well, because you come from that heritage. But it's all white, all boys, all white. What else do you see? We're doing good, yeah.
Newspaper bags.
Newspaper bags. Well, let me ask you this, where are you from? Where'd you go? Everything's about high school with me. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to a school in Connecticut called Loomis.
Loomis School. Private school.
I was a paper boy for the Hartford Courant.
All right, so you were a newsboy. Perfect. All right. How often did you deliver the Hartford Courant?
Every morning,
And what time did you get it?
5:30.
5:30. And how did you get that job?
I don't recall. I guess kids were getting those jobs.
All right, but you felt obligated to get out there and do something at 5:30 in the morning, deliver paper, right? Why did people buy the newspaper, do you think? That's it. I don't have answers for any of this. So why do you think what were they looking for when they bought it?
Well, I think they were looking for, first, there were 5 editions in most papers in big cities. There were 4 editions in Hartford. And if you got the late edition in Hartford, which was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the Times, a lot of news transpired overnight. And there wasn't morning TV, there wasn't TV. I graduated high school in '58, so I'm a bit older.
Okay.
So I think they were looking for what happened overnight.
You were actually looking for information. That is how we communicated with each other. If you go back, because I haven't gotten ready for this, and looked at headlines I was looking at Maine papers, but those newspapers were packed with news. I mean, there were a lot of stories on each paper, and that is how you actually found out when something happened, right? So there was information that people were willing to pay for, and now what did you learn? Did you go door to door?
Yes.
All right. Do we have another newsboy here so I don't pick up on him totally? Yes. Did you go door to door? What paper did you deliver?
The Springfield paper?
Okay.
Massachusetts paper?
All right. And did you go door to door?
Yes.
And did those people, when you knocked on their door, did they know who you were?
Well, I did early like that, man. So I delivered very early in the morning, so I didn't see anybody really.
You just threw them. How'd you collect your money?
Well, they go collect money, but I did.
When you went to collect money, did they know who you were? You weren't doing this for free, right? You were doing this as a job.
They just thought of me as a paper boy. I never thought about that.
Right.
I don't think they ever told me.
Well, you're in college now. Let's think about that. They probably knew who you were because they would have had contacted you if they weren't there or they wanted to suspend the paper or somebody else. We have other newsboys here. Yes. Where'd you deliver paper?
I grew up on Mount Desert Island, but the newspaper I delivered was Grit,
Yeah.
published in Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
I remember. God. I must admit I haven't thought of Grit in a long time. It's the highlight of my head. But did your customers know who you were when you knocked?
Oh, yes.
And why did they know who you were?
because I showed up every Saturday morning as the paper.
Right. Anybody else? I don't want to beat this to death. Yes. Joe, what'd you deliver?
Born in Pajevska, which is no longer there, but it was handed down to me from my brothers. And like this gentleman said, 5 o'clock in the morning. 5 o'clock in the morning, you was out there, and sometimes they had a friendly dog, sometimes they didn't. But you knew everybody in
But
the area.
you knew everybody, didn't you, Joe? Well, you would anyway, because of your personality. You would know everybody. But this is an interesting kind of point. You got it from your brother. I got my paper route from my brother. And I gave it to my brother. All right? It wasn't like there was a website where they would advertise, you know, for the best newsboy. There was a culture in which these jobs, and it's not just newsboys, everybody, that collectively was passed around because you knew people. Right? The purpose of our talk today is how do we communicate with each other? And this was actually a way. And of course, huge, listen, I worked paper mill for a while at Pajevska, but I represented the unions in paper mills all over the state, and they made a lot of newsprint here. We cut a lot of trees in Maine. We cut a lot of newsprint. People made their jobs. This was their living. It was part of who we were as a society. People made newsprints, printed it out, they could get the paper. Where did we get the New York Times? We don't have to get the New York Times now, right? Go like this. You click on it. Click on that, you'll find the story came up an hour ago. I'm in it about the Attorney General of New Jersey taking over the Patterson Police Department. So if you're from New Jersey, you might want to read it. But the point is you can get it instantly, right? So when I was a kid, the New York Times would be piled up in huge stacks outside Days Variety, maybe one other place in town, and all the Bowdoin professors would line up on Sunday morning to get it. But it wasn't like it was available. Even when I was Attorney General, the New York Times would come in the afternoon, you know, and one member of my staff would go over and get one and pass it around. So the idea of what today, the instant communication, which we take for granted, many of you I assume, you know, if it's not the New York Times, the Washington Post, Boston Globe, whatever it is that you're reading online, is a result of an instant communication, which was totally foreign in our lifetime. Not in our childhood lifetime, in our adult lifetime. As to how we get information, and how we get information is how, of course, we process it. Well, we've kind of knocked that around. There's only one thing that you haven't mentioned yet about that picture that I really want to have somebody mention before we're done. Take a look at the last names.
Jim, before you go on, I'm told that they're having trouble hearing you in the back.
I'll do my best.
You gotta speak into the microphone.
I'll do my best. Kathy, you tell me, Kathy, if you can't hear me, I want you to jump up and wave. Okay, thank you. Class 66, we keep track of each other. With her husband Fred, also the class of 66. So what's the one thing that Lisa, I want to raise before we leave that photograph? Yes?
No girls.
Yeah, that was the first thing we said. They're all men, right? Boys, right? They're all male. One other factor, look at the last name, see if it rings a bell.
They're all French.
Yes. Who said that? Right, absolutely. So you have, of the 21 people in there, only 5 of us were not Franco people, which is not unusual. When you look at the fact that in 1910 in Brunswick, 50% of the town was, direct descendants or had come from Canada or were part of the Franco community. So this is a different place today. For those of you who live in Brunswick for a long time, you've seen the difference. But for some of you who haven't and just arrived here, you say, "Oh, what a lovely little town! You know, what a great town Brunswick is. This is terrific." You walk down one side of Main Street, you come up the other. I did it the other day. You count 34 places to eat. What is that about? Why does the town? Why do you need 34 places to eat? I think it's the only place where people actually get together. Because what have we lost? And that's part of the things. Listen, I'm not romanticizing our childhood. There was a lot of really bad stuff out there, okay? There was a lot of bad stuff. Obviously, the discrimination against all kinds of people. I mean, certainly the LGBTQ community, but also the Franco community. The Catholics felt they were discriminated against. The people who lived in Pajevska felt that they were discriminated against. The people who lived in Harpswell figured that we're just, Harpswell had like 1,000 people, most of them were fishermen, and they were discriminated against, right? So there was a lot of that kind of ugly feeling. People smoked, they drank, There were fights, there were car accidents where friends of ours were killed because cars were dangerous, there was no airbags, right? There was no seat belts. I'm not romanticizing at all the experience that we went through. There were some very, very hard times. But on the other hand, we were seemingly able to address issues and think them through and figure out how to work them out. And in my thinking about this, I'd love to get your reactions to this. Brunswick, and I'm using Brunswick as a metaphor because it's my town, is that it was a compact community. So you would physically see the same people over and over and over. All right? Especially if you moved up from Harpswell, like Lindy Larson, a former state senator in the back row, moved up from Harpswell. When she got to Brunswick, she told me that she'd immediately start to see the same people. So what were the major institutions that tended to bring people together at a point which may no longer be functioning? Where is Mr. Dumais sitting? Wake up. My former altar boy colleague, Mike Dumoy, he's much younger than I am, but where did you and I meet?
Church, probably.
Yeah, we were altar boys together.
Yeah.
We were altar boys together. So you'd see people in church, right? Who would come to the church? We would see our teachers. We would see our police officers. We would see lots of Bowdoin professors. We would see the kids of Bowdoin professors. And stemming from the church, whatever church it happened to be, would be a whole myriad of other social organizations. The bowling alley was owned by the Knights of Columbus. Right? I mean, how many churches own bowling alleys? Well, come to Brunswick, right? There was a connection between that. Your Boy Scout troop, your Girl Scout troop, they were connected to a religious institution. And I'm not talking about the theology here, I'm talking about the concept that these were community organizations, and everyone kind of knew where everybody went to church. You just kind of knew it. My older sister Ann, God love her, lives out in Seattle now. She wrote a column for the Brunswick Record, which I delivered, in which because she got paid by the word, she went around to each of the churches and interviewed the youth groups at each of these churches and wrote a column about it. All that. And remember, go back to our original principle. Why were people buying the newspaper? They were buying the newspaper so they could find out what was going on. Right? So this kind of overlap, this repeated, constant overlap would resolve it. And so we were free-range kids, right? We'd stand out the door, right? Does that resonate with you? Did your parents know where you were? No? Where are you from? Where's your home?
Fairport, New York.
All right. Your parents didn't care about you? They didn't love you at all? They just threw you out? That's why you have a beard now? They just sent you out the door? No, did they know?
They didn't know where I was during the day.
They expect you to come home to eat.
Oh, yeah.
But that's about it. All right, anybody else, free range kid? Somebody else? Oh my God, hands up everywhere. Yes, out here. Did you? Yes, I'm sorry. Where are you from?
Putney, Vermont.
Okay, and what happened to you in the morning? Parents threw you out? You off your mind?
My brother and I he was really my best playmate, so we'd go out and ride our bikes.
Ride a bike. What happens is when you have a community which is geographically close together, you could ride your bike. Now, first of all, we shouldn't underestimate the demographic shift. In 1960, the median age in Brunswick was 20 years old. 20 years old. Now, the Naval Air Station kind of drove that because the base was here and they had lots and lots and lots of kids, right? We used to call them Peter Pans because they get about third grade and then they move away. So that's probably artificially low, but it's at least in the 20s. Today, median age, Brunswick, 45. 45 years old. A stunning change in how, and the town has grown from 15,000 to 21,000, so the town itself, the area has grown a lot, but the town itself hasn't grown all that much. And so this town was filled with kids riding their bicycles because you could go anywhere you wanted, off you went, and you had to learn to entertain yourself. And sometimes you get in trouble. But lots of times you'd figure it out. You'd have to pick up baseball games, pick up basketball games. You would have to figure out yourself how to actualize your experience. You're a kid. You're not thinking big thoughts. you're not thinking you're ever going to be in your 70s and sitting in the Brunswick Library. But speaking of the Brunswick Library, this was a home for me and my siblings. We were here constantly. The librarians had our numbers memorized. We'd walk out, piles of books. This was the Tierney place. But other people did different things, right? They'd go to dances. The guy who go to dances, no, who'd want to dance with me? So we would go out. But the point is, they were institutions, they were buildings that became connecting buildings that reinforced each other. Okay, they reinforced each other. So when I rode my bicycle on Main Street, on the sidewalk on Main Street, and the police officer, Officer Vining, told me to get off. He knew me from St. Charles. He knew me because his son Paul was an altar boy with me. I mean, I couldn't hide, right? You know, when I tried to get a drink when I was 19 at Bill's restaurant, Gertrude Peabody came up to me. I said, Bill's mother, damn, how come the waitress knows me? I'm 19, I'm never gonna get this beer. You know, which she looked at me and I went, oh, humiliated. So we couldn't get away with much in that regard. You know, when they cut down the tree in front of, St. Paul's and St. Charles, we knew with it, right? We knew exactly who did it. We knew it within, right? We didn't need an email to know who did it. We said, oh my God, one of them just passed away. It wasn't in this obituary. I was very pleased. We cut down the pine tree in front of First Parish Church. So this kind of community sense had its ups and downs because you kind of had a place, but there was also a mandate by virtue of getting up, to deliver the Hartford Courant, or the Portland Press Herald, or the Brunswick Record, or whatever it does. You had a mandate to work. Everybody worked. Because there was a presumption that if you worked, you could do fine. If you worked hard enough, you could do fine. You're not going to be rich, but you're going to do fine. So did we have politics? Absolutely. Republicans, Democrats, as you can tell from the picture of me in that, in that newsboy picture, I was already running. I mean, look at me in that picture, sitting out there. So just look at me, standing in the front row. I've got this 10-year-old look into the future, So anyway, so I would go back and forth between the Republican and Democratic town committees. I went to the Republican town committee so I could spy and go back to the Democratic town committee. Literally, this is true. So I went to hear Margaret Chase Smith speak. It was great. Governor loved all that. And then I'd run over and I'd tell her, who was on the Democratic town committee? My mother, of course. She was on every committee. So there was my mother, there was Gertrude Peabody, she was on the committee. And there was, the people who worked at Bowdoin, usually, was employees and staff. Polly Greason was on the committee too. Well, who was she? Her husband was the president of Bowdoin College. Right? So Roy Greason was president of Bowdoin College. You also, try to imagine this today, chair of the Brunswick School Board. Also did the first capital campaign for Midcoast Hunger. All right? President of Bowdoin College. Part of the community. Who was my newspaper? I read the Brunswick Record. Who delivered the Portland Press Herald to my house? Chris Coles, the son of the president of Bowdoin College. In other words, try to imagine, if you can, if you move to Brunswick or if you come here in a few years, try to imagine a community where even though there were these social differences, right, there were also ability to communicate. So the Bowdoin College faculty kids, they all went to Brunswick High School. There wasn't any bus taking people off to Waynfleet. Everybody lived here. Everybody knew each other. Bowdoin always got 4 or 5 kids from the senior class went to Bowdoin, kind of backup school for a lot of people. It's not true today, but it was fairly much integrated into a community that allowed people to figure out how to make decisions and get through day-to-day stuff. So, I'm almost run down this, and we're going to talk. But a question just came to my mind. How many of you, when you went out to, we talked to the men here, mostly, right? We talk about baseball. Saw the article in the paper, Little League's kind of gone away. It was in the paper the other day. Knew how to throw the bat to pick up sides. Merce, right? Hands going up. You know what I mean? What was throwing the bat like? What did you do when you threw the bat?
you tried to get it so your thumb would be near the top.
That's right. You throw, exactly. Russ, you got it? You throw the bat, and we would decide, you had to pick up teams, right? There's a bunch of kids show up. There was no organization, there was no shirt, except that I had a glove until Scott Staples, who's here, is our PhD psychologist, stole my glove in the second grade, and he has the gall. He has the unmitigated gall to show up again today, as he often does, following me around, taunting me of the fact that he stole my glove. But because we didn't have enough gloves to go around, we didn't have one ball, and you would throw the bat. And you threw the bat as a mechanism for deciding who, and you put the bat, right? Then you get your thumb over the top, and whoever gets the thumb over the top gets first choice. Of course, I was always last choice, so that wasn't a major issue in my life. But the point was, I used this, so I've been trying this out, throwing the bat out to people. And even in my kids' generation, my kids are in their 50s, right? They have no idea what I'm talking about. No idea what it means to throw the bat. No idea what it means to assemble and choose up your own team. No concept of it. And so certainly when you go from that age to the current age, where the rec center now, nobody's riding a bike to this rec center because it's 4 miles out, so nobody's going there. And so the question is, when did this start to change? When did this kind of community decision-making, and what were the impetuses? And I remember, I didn't say we're going to come up with any answers. I'm not coming up with the answers today. But we had a Main Street. I checked the 1965 Brunswick Register. There were 5 men's clothing stores on Main Street. 2 hardware stores. 2 big grocery stores, the A&P and First National. Tondro's Market, where the French people went, right? I was told lower prices there, so I never went in. If you spoke French, you got a lower price than you did if you went to the A&P. I don't know whether that's true because I didn't speak French. But the point was, you had Tondro's Market, you had a bar, Roland and Andy's bar, right on the corner. Some of you were nodding. Trying to forget Roland and Andy's bar, but there it was. And so what happened was, in that situation, about the only thing on Main Street that's in the same place where it was is Rosignol's hair cutter. There's a young woman from St. John Valley who, that's still a barbershop. We had lots of barbershops in town. We had 2 movie theaters, we had 2 drive-ins, right? We had factories. I have to explain to my Harvard Law student that a factory is a place where you make things. And you actually make things where you go in, as I did at Pajevska, that many of you did, and you take and you punch a clock at the minute you get in, and then you punch it, and you manufacture something in blank looks, because then wealth is accumulated by having wealth and turning it into more wealth. That's how wealth is generated in this culture. And as this continues, of course, to skyrocket, go back to the original principle that if you get up and you work hard, you're going to be fine. To a generation today, I don't know, but there has to be a sense of, maybe that's not true. No matter how hard I work, which is why a friend of mine said the only place in Maine where you can find lines are the food pantry and the cannabis shops. You really want to see a line outside of people waiting to get in. That's what you're going to find. And unemployment is 2%, right? So that means there are jobs available. Some of that's demographic, some of that is cultural. So with a town like that, and a place like that, but we had factories. My mother worked in the mall. They're just constantly getting fired. Actually, the aforesaid Roy Greason made the mistake of hiring my mother. I knew this was not going to work out. And she was fired, of course, and she should have been fired because I don't know where I got it, but she kind of had a mouth on her, See, to use an expression, because I'm with you, all these old expressions, you'd never say that today, right? She's got a mouth on her. So she get fired, but yet she and Roy Greason ended up swimming together in the Bowden Pool in years, laughing about the fact that they once worked together, because workplaces are great socializing experiences. Whether it's a factory or a store, it's a socializing experience. And if you go into one of those men's clothing stores to go into Benoit's to buy your Cub Scout uniform, the manager, Gordon O'Donnell, knows you're going to be back later to buy your Boy Scout uniform, right? And he knows you're going to be in to buy your merit badge sash. And he knows you and you know him. He's got 4 kids. Skip passed away. There's Ann, there's Jimmy who taught school. I mean, the point is we kind of had a community, and it wasn't easy. Remember, I'm not romanticizing this, but it was a mechanism for making decisions. And so with that, I'm going to start asking questions, unless cold calling, because I teach law school, unless some of you start reacting to some of the things that I said to you. Checking the time here. Great. So let's have a conversation. Anybody, give me an idea. How far off am I? How close am I? Kathy. Kathy, just so everybody knows, Kathy Fox. Kathy Gerber. She's only been married for 40 years. I still call her Kathy Fox. She's in my Latin class, and she taught at Longfield School for many decades.
I feel that schools build community. Neighborhood schools.
Can everybody hear her? Okay, go ahead,
I
Jen.
have a teacher's voice, so I should. And that's gone now. We have larger schools, and children have to move from pre-K2, then to pre-5, then to 6, 7, 8, and then high school. So the bonding of communication and community, I feel, is different.
There was no question that schools were, especially in a town with all these kids, absolutely strong, guaranteed way to multiply, because you would see your teacher in church, or you'd see them working summers, on the golf course, or there was a community, and then you would have schools. And all of this done with the best intention. I mean, nobody woke up and said, let's divide up all our schools. These are decisions, whereas my friend Kerber says, people didn't connect the dots. They didn't understand what this thing would look like 4, 5, 10 years down the road. So you do something now that makes sense in the immediate, and then you don't have a town hall, you don't have a town hall, that means you have another town hall, and then pretty soon you're in an antiseptic building. So, yes.
I just wanted to compliment you on your analysis, because I come from a small town called New York City. And I don't need
He's from New York,
I could give that same description of communities in New York that are just like you identified.
Go ahead.
In Manhattan, there's Chinatown. There's a little bit, you go up in the 80s for Czechoslovakia. If you know where to go in Staten Island, you can go for the Italian group. You go to Brooklyn, and it's the largest borough of churches, and each church has a community built around it. And so what you're talking about, I think, is common to the world of communities.
Well, that's, I'm not arguing, I'm not from New York, I was born there, but I get it. Follow up on that, yes.
What's changed?
That's the question.
We moved to Washington in 1979, in 1975, and left in 1989. 4 administrations. We left from a small town in Connecticut where we had a community built in many ways like Brunswick. We said, what's going to happen in Washington? Turned out we had a very similar community. Congressmen lived in the district. They didn't go home to their district to raise money every Thursday morning. We had Democrats come to dinner, Republicans come to dinner, together. People from the media came. People from academia came. There was civilization in Washington in the period that we lived there. And then we left. And I take no responsibility for what but we still have friends there. And the civility has gone away.
So even with your friends who you continue to communicate with, they're reporting a difference back to you. It's not just what we're watching on.
We go back for weddings and funerals.
Right.
And there's no civility now. Nobody has dinner together.
So what changed? What do you think changed, and how did it change? Because that's where we're moving, and obviously this discussion, when I started talking about newspapers at the beginning, we don't communicate that way anymore. So what do you think?
What changed? Well, first, the requirement that congressmen raise many, many dollars every month back in their district. So they're not there. They don't move their families there. Families are an integral part of this whole thing you're talking about. And so they come in and they stay in bachelor quarters here, there, and everywhere with members of their own party. So it is a self-supporting set of values that.
Well, how is that different than if you're getting your news online instead of getting a physical newspaper? And do you remember how newspapers used to smell and how they used to feel, especially that Sunday paper, the Maine Telegram, and then all the cartoons and everything? You could feel it, right? I'm watching you, smiling with me, you're working with me here. So what happens is now, of course, that when we communicate that way, every article we read, every time we click, we are self-selecting the next article. It's just not the article we're reading, it's the next article, which is why I try to still get the physical copy of the paper, even though I get it online, because it's a different experience. But we're building our own silos, you know, and with, you're using a Washington example, but we could probably use a Bodenham example. We're building the same sort of thing. Yes, over here. You had to.
Well, two things came to mind. One is that there's no space in our lives now. We talked about growing up in a hometown where we were all running around, and we did, and we didn't think about what was not going on. Now our life is consumed with, it seems to me, consumed with what's going on or not going on, and there's no space to live in it. And I think when you start getting bombarded with that, it almost makes you feel a bit cornered. I remember when the USA Today newspaper first came out, all the articles were very short, very brief. And I remember thinking, we're going to start creating an environment where people don't have to think about the story, they can just read the soundbite. So we've turned into sound bites, and then we run with sound bites because we don't have the time and the inclination or the wherewithal to get into the detail, because now the detail is so obscure. And so it's perfect for people that want to be confused. And
I wish that's a great line. I wish I thought of that. So our current system of getting information is perfect for people who affirmatively want to be confused or are seeking, you know, such simplistic answers that it doesn't require any additional investigation to get down and try to find out. Yes, some other hands. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Ms. Bishop, isn't it?
Yes.
Ah, I remember.
I think what has changed dramatically is the social, the internet and the way people communicate. And I also think that we listen to a biased news anymore. We don't listen to Walter Cronkite anymore. For example, I live in Bodenham. I would run up and down the street looking for my paper if it wasn't there.
Wow.
And I would call up.
I did too, now that I think about that. That's it.
And I still do, but in Bodenham, because of cost, the Times Record can no longer be distributed in Bodenham,
Right.
and I have to get it online. And I don't like, I like the feel of it.
It's great for the obituaries, though, that's all I look at.
And I had to
I
get,
don't know about all you guys.
I had to get all of my news about what the Brunswick Town Council was
Right.
doing, and I was interested in that, and I still am.
But you can't get a physical,
I cannot get a physical copy delivered to me because of the cost.
yeah.
I'd like to pick up on what you said about the institutions in our childhood reinforcing things. The scouts reinforced the right things, the church reinforced the right. What is reinforcing anything today?
Right.
Talk about that for a minute.
Well, that's to all of us. I told you at the beginning, I'm not here with any answers. I have a few suggestions at the end, but I certainly don't have any answers as to what is reinforcing. You know, I did mention earlier veterans organizations, which were absolutely essential to this town. And connected, provided they connected. It's all of our teachers, World War II veterans. That's just the way it was, right? I mean, it wasn't, we were born, I was born in 1947, so, you know, the idea when somebody's talking about the war, you didn't have to ask what was going on, right? And so all those cultural things that we understood to be to be kind of essential, automatic, because we shared them. So this morning, because I was a Boy Scout, I looked up the requirements for the Citizenship in the Nation merit badge and the Citizenship in the Community merit badge. Needless to say, something I hadn't looked at in 60 years, right? Maybe more. But the requirements, the current requirements are tremendous. And they're very bringing people together. What is the Constitution? You have to go out and listen to a debate of both sides of some issue at a municipal meeting and come back and report before you can get your merit badge, right? But who's in the Boy Scouts? The answer is nobody, right? So, and if you were, you don't have that. I crawled up every ladder I could find when I was a kid. I went to Boy Scouts, I went to the Old Boys, ran for president of the senior class, made a big mistake. Scott Staples was my running mate over here. He's sitting here now smirking. And it was the first of many elections I lost. But the point is, your point is, where is the confirming institution? And that's where we obviously are in huge trouble. But I do think, as I really researched this, the physicality, the ability to physically be close to people became more important to me as I thought back about what Main Street looked like and about how the rec was something you could bicycle to and how, the schools, as Kathy's pointed out, had more strength to it. You had more older brothers and sisters in the same class because you weren't sliced up. The dots were connected, if you will. I talked to some people yesterday. They made a great point. They said, our parents, we were free range, but because the town was so connected, they kind of knew if you were hanging out with the wrong people. Right? They could kind of figure it out. Maybe Officer Vining would tell you. Maybe Father McFarland would tell you. Maybe Pastor Smith would tell you. Maybe, Minister Ellis would tap you on the shoulder and say, Jimmy's running around, but, be careful. Well, today, there's no way, if you're a parent, that you're able to cabin that. If your kids go out to run with the wrong people, they're doing it on their phone. They're gone. They're gone. There's no way the most loving parent in the world. So this results in an increase in fear, and I feel a lot of fear. Deb Gould is here. Deb, you've told how you watch kids go by, you watch parents bring their kids to the bus stop, right? And how many blocks is it in this little beautiful bucolic Hawthorne Street?
3 max,
Three blocks.
maybe 2, 3 blocks.
And the parents, we are, especially you, are thrown out into the community and told to do whatever you want to do. I'm going over to the Levitt house, I'm going to see if Huey's around, his sister's here. That's gone. So parents, same when you're watching sports, they want to put you on the travel team so you could succeed and you could be a really good athlete. When maybe what you ought to learn is to be not such a good athlete, but know how to throw the bat. And, maybe you would be better off figuring out how to pick up sides and who's going to get stuck with Jimmy Tierney while he's here. Somebody's got to take him, as opposed to having a travel team where everybody's a star and Jimmy's not going to play baseball. Going to not be good. It wasn't good. Boy, I practiced. I tried. It wasn't really good. So that's the kind of thing that we miss, I think, when we're looking for enforcing institutions. Yes.
So I think we've changed from a world of safety to a world of fear. When we were kids, thank you. When we were kids, our parents would let us go, and they basically weren't afraid that something was going to happen to us. Either it was because they knew the neighborhood, they knew if you were messing around, the parent up the street would say something, those kinds of things. And we could make mistakes at a level where it didn't cost us our lives, or it didn't, wreck our lives for the future. And I think one of the hardest parts in being a grandparent is watching parents who are afraid to let their kids explore, make stupid mistakes when they're small enough that it's not going to ruin their lives. And I think it makes it much harder. And when they go to the phone, I think that partly because kids need to do that on their own. And we don't give them any opportunities to do that. So why not use it? They have to do it someplace where their parents aren't observing them all of the time.
And that, the last you and Deb both are reasserting points, and yet, on the other hand, does anybody here know what a slam book is? Or slam books, yeah, all right, the women in the room raise their hands. Slam books, these books. So if you were in the 6th grade, I'm sure no one did, but someone could write in a slam book, say, I have a really crush on Jim Tierney, he's really hot. Or whatever the 1961 equivalent of Jim Tierney being hot. You could write that in a slam book and pass it around your friends, right? Well, today that slam book could be put on the internet, right? And you could immediately have that child subject to who knows what kind of anonymous, right? So the fear is not irrational. It's not irrational to walk them the 3 blocks. It's just deeply disappointing, because Deb's neighborhood is going to be the safest, most bucolic, perfect neighborhood on earth, around Wilford Street, Brunswick. And yet there's that fear that continues to exist. And I don't know. I've got 8 grandkids. So I watch how my kids parent. And I obey the first rule of grandparenting is I stay out of it. All right, that's the last thing my kids need is me involved, grandpa telling them how they should live, right? So, but I watch, and I watch as keenly as I can because I love them so dearly. And I do see that they are afraid. They are far more protective of their kids. Not just of physical danger, but of emotional danger, and with legitimacy. Bullying, terrible thing, right? So you want to protect your kids, and yet you also want them to be kids. So we're wrestling with this, and so because I don't advise them, but I think about it. I think about it a lot for precisely the reasons that you're explaining. Here's one thought I had. Maybe somebody came up with this. When we were kids, we had duck and cover drills, right? Because somebody's going to drop a nuclear bomb on us and blow us to smithereens. So, all right, okay. So I go out in the hall, you get down your hands and knees, you put your hand over your hands, and you have for 3 minutes, and Mrs. Brown says, okay, back in the classroom, back for English class. So today, the kids have live shooter drills. Yes. Yeah. Right? How is that different? I mean, I know emotionally how it's different, but intellectually, one is a thermonuclear war, which is going to destroy the planet, right? Which they frightened us with. And the other live shooter drill seems a lot realer somehow to me. And every kid, if you're a little kid, how do you feel about that? You're going to say, well, someone might come in here with a gun and, shoot your teacher, and so, yeah, how do you do that?
So think about this. We grew up with the story of the atomic bomb, the story of it. Maybe you saw, a film of it, maybe. These kids actually see this stuff. They see it on the news, they hear about it on the news, even if their parents are very careful about them it gets talked about. So, it is much more of a reality. Mm-hmm. This could happen here. It could. And it does happen.
It could. Right? Yes. We have no idea what's going on out there today. So, do you think that the capacity to directly communicate to the children is going to wipe out a lot of parental or grandparental? They're going to see it themselves. Is your point? Right. Yeah.
Ask that question.
I'm saying because the kids are able to see this themselves. In other words, the communication is able to come directly to them. It's not an abstract World War II bomb. It's something that could come to them in their own lives.
They can identify with it.
They can see
a kid. They see that somebody who looks like me or is a 4-year-old, even if they just hear it, even if they don't actually see the visual, because the parents don't let them see the visual. The story is that. And kids aren't stupid either. If you'd say, why are you making us do this?
Yeah.
It's like they're not going to say, well, I'm just going to do this just because the teacher told me to do it. They want to know why do I have to do this? There's people out there who want to actually kill us. Somebody's going to come in here and shoot us. Why wouldn't kids be scared?
Right. Why would we be afraid on their behalf? Yes.
I think right now, if there was an active shooter in here, a 6-year-old.
Excuse me.
No better.
Could you start over again? I'm sorry, I was coughing.
I think if there was an active shooter in here right now, or 6 or 7-year-old would know better what to do than I would. I would just panic. They unfortunately would really know what to do. That's sad.
Yeah. Is it Is it a bad thing that they know how to do it?
No, unfortunately, they have to know what to do, but
Which is an astounding admission, isn't it? I mean, we're sitting here in peaceful Brunswick on a beautiful day, and you're just casually saying, yeah, I really, and I'm with you. But that you want the kids over at the Stowe School to know what to do if somebody comes in with a, yes, and back.
It's deeply affecting the mental health of our youth, though. It's not just our youth, but many generations, or at least the younger generations. It's the paranoia is justified. Sadly, I think.
Yeah. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, right? I mean, that's the old line. Yes.
Well, I wonder about the whole business of being divided mainly into two big ways. And it seems to me that one group of people, like the Tierneys, went to the library and, studied. And a lot of the Bowdoin kids went to the church and so on.
Sure.
And a lot of people learned how to find a way.
Yes.
Make a living. And then somehow there's a whole big group who are very angry that they've got left behind, that we're not climbing the ladders. And for what reason, I'm not sure. It was it motivation, or were people discouraging them, saying they were, I don't know, something unattractive about them, or they weren't not smart, or not as, for whatever reason. So to me, that's a very big part. And then something like the church, as you've pointed out, hopefully levels that out and says, that it's not making the grade that's the end of the world. But so we don't have that kind of influence. And we have a lot of angry people.
Right. We're furious. And it's not just, there've always been people who said, oh, the rich people are doing this and I'm not rich, so they get to do that and I don't get to do that, right? But what I'm seeing is that somehow transforms itself into a blind fury. That it's, it's not like, oh yeah, that's the doctor's kid, they get to go skiing at Sugarloaf. I haven't been to Sugarloaf in my life. I don't know what Sugarloaf is, that was my childhood perspective. And now we're not talking about that. We're talking about something and so the very idea of reading, the idea of going research, this allows conspiracy theories to flourish and flow. And one of the things, I've been emailing some high school friends. I only have high school friends. I don't have any other friends. So one said the other day that don't skip two things, which was very interesting. The first is that this is a zero-sum game now. It's either a yes or a no. Yes or a no. It's not, well, let's see what we can do. Let's figure out how somebody can get Jimmy Tierney, put him out in the right field. It's okay, but he's here, he lives in our community. It's, no, we don't want him, right? So it's a yes, no, and that's the internet itself, right? It's a computer program, it's yay or nay. That was kind of the first point. But the second point was the economic incentive kind of inbred in capitalism as we move from a society that makes things to a thing that communicates things. I guess that's what all these TV shows are. I used to work at Core TV for a while. Bad experience. I needed the money, so I was a talking head. But the idea that you have an economic incentive to make it as bad as possible. And it's one of the reasons I quit Core TV. It was a great gig. I'd go down, whenever I wanted to go down, they'd put me on TV. I'd be feeling down, cheer me up. People recognize me. So I said, look at me. Cab driver in Pittsburgh says, you're the guy at Core TV. Made me feel great. So ridiculous. But I'd have a little plug in my ear, and they'd be saying, you gotta put an edge to this. Don't say that the jury is really wrestling with this. Come in and say, no juror could possibly find this person guilty or not guilty, whatever it was. And I said, wait a minute, that's not my brand. I'm a professor, I teach at Columbia Law School. That's my brand. My brand is not to jump your ratings, this was clear. And now that was nothing compared to the way it is now. I had a TV talking head, friend of mine, national head, tell me he got fired. He didn't mind. I said, why? He said, well, I have dark hair. I gave you his name, he had all correct. I said, what, you have dark hair? I got dark hair. So what's that got to do with it? He said, oh, what happened was, they never want to, I have to go on with a blonde. He happened to be a Democrat and a Republican. And the Republican who was the blonde got a job on the campaign, so they hired a dark-haired Republican to take that spot, so they needed a blonde Democrat to be the talking head on CNN. And I went, this can't be true. And he's like totally cool. He said, oh, that's all right. It's all right. I'm going over to MSNBC. I'm fine. What is this? Right? And so that kind of absurdity shows a real, it is, and it's right at the core of capitalism, right? You've got an investment, you want to maximize the cost. That's why they keep, these creeps like Bill O'Reilly on the air so much. No matter how many sexual harassment settlements they pay, they're generating eyeballs, so they keep them on the air without any moral regard at all. People who we would, if they were working, if they were working for us at any company we ever ran, we'd fire them instantly. They'd be gone, right? Instead, we put on television, we make them, multimillionaires, we pay their fees. This kind of thing, the capitalistic drive here is a serious, and I think inherent part here. I don't have an answer. We haven't recovered. We haven't recovered from Vietnam. We haven't recovered from a vast disallowance of our economic resources. So who was rich when I was a kid in Brunswick? I'm only saying this because you know why? Today they're putting the flowers out on Main Street. You know who did that? Alfred Center. Right? He gave the money to the town. I thought he was the richest guy in the world because he owned Center's store, right? And he did have a lot of money. And so he starts the Center's funds, giving away millions of dollars to the people of Maine and to people of Brunswick. And the flowers were going out to there. I thought, I always think of Alfred Center, who was probably, he and Dick Morrill, probably the last two Republicans to ever get elected in Brunswick to anything. But it was, I thought about, that was my idea of rich. The idea of, billionaire trust fund, this is beyond anything I can imagine. All of us is beyond imagine. So the question goes back to, can you work hard enough to get ahead? Can you work, or do you mind to just get online at the cannabis shop on Friday after work? Because can you really do it? I mean, we can say it, we can put it in our rhetoric, let's just go work hard, put a few hours of overtime, and you're going, put overtime in this, I'm not moving here, I'm not moving this. So the result, of course, is smaller families, fewer kids, right? Because you can't really think it about, and you're afraid, you're both afraid. So I'm the only one in the world with the grandkids, I think. That's not quite true. Not quite. 9. There you go. My friend Frank Wright is chair of the school board at SET 75. He's got 13. So he's got first rank. Yeah, what were you going to say?
I'd like to pass along a positive story about Brunswick community.
Great, and then I've got a couple, and we're going to wrap up because someone's talking.
My wife and I were encouraged by our daughter who lives in Freeport to move someplace in Maine. And so it was, where does Wendy live? Where's the UU church? And where's the library? And it became very clear that we needed to move to Brunswick.
Well, you should move here. They're all right here. The post office.
We should move onto this block, right? But the really important thing that happened for us is that the 43 years that we had invested in our UU church in Massachusetts, we're able to cash in here and have an instant community and
church,
just wonderful.
So that you're getting to my final thing. Churches, hugely important church communities. Veterans organizations, smile when you see a veteran. It's hugely important community. High school friends, very important. Every Wednesday, we have our Zoom. Our high school friends, and we knew in high school, we Zoom. And that's very important. And if you haven't talked to them in a long time, I mentioned this to Kelly once. Kelly said, I don't know any of your high school friends. Yes, you do. Dig them up, look them up, because they may be the only people who remember your parents. Just talk to them. And build those kinds of, if you're fortunate enough to be able to be philanthropic, do it to a community where it has that kind of interaction. Midcoast Hunger has 750 volunteers, just in the Midcoast region, 750 volunteers. That's a community waiting for somebody, whether you moved in or not. And so here's what I go to the parade, go into the parade for probably 72 years. I've been going to the Memorial Day Parade. And I come back in front of my house, and there's this beautiful young couple there. They got a baby, like, sure enough, 4 weeks old, little Simon. And we get talking, because I like to talk, a cute baby, blah, blah. And so I go, where are you from? They obviously, shall we say, weren't from here. Do that. And I said, where are you from? And they said, oh, they're from Massachusetts and New York and so on. Well, she went to Yale. He went to BC. He's working for a startup. She's working for a consulting firm. The startup is in the Silicon Valley, and the consulting firm is in Chicago. All right? Live in Brunswick. Why? So, I love Brunswick. What a wonderful place. Look at the patriotic and parade, everybody that have. I said, where do you live? She said, oh, you wouldn't know where it is. I said, well, try me. She said, well, I live in Jordan Avenue. Where in Jordan Avenue? So I live in 4 Jordan Avenue. I said, it's a Singer house. She says, what, a Singer house? Yeah, Joe Singer. He was municipal judge here. And, you know, his wife Annette taught in the school. They lost a son. AIDS. I mean, what do you want to know about the Singers, right? They kept kosher. I could never figure out that, you know. Mrs. Singer, how come you got different plates? I don't understand. I don't understand. So they are standing on the shoulders of the Singers, a true community, part of the Brunswick community. And he was a municipal judge, right? And they live in this house, and so that should give us hope, right? Thanks for having me.